The Springfield County Courthouse fell silent as the heavy oak doors burst open. 7-year-old Lily Thompson stood trembling in the doorway, her small hand clutching the collar of a large German shepherd. Rain cascaded from her blonde curls, her blue eyes wide with determination despite the tears streaming down her dirt-smudged cheeks. "Order, order in my court." Judge Walter Harrison's gavel cracked against wood, but his authoritative voice faltered as the child locked eyes with him. "Please?" Lily's voice echoed through the stunned silence. "Max is all I have left. He's my only family." The German shepherd pressed protectively against the girl's side, his intelligent eyes surveying the room. A low, rumbling growl emanated from his throat when a security officer approached. The judge's face drained of color as his gaze fixed on the military dog tag hanging from the child's neck. His hand, still gripping the gavel, began to shake. "Clear the courtroom," he whispered. Then louder, "Clear the courtroom immediately. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now." Let's continue with the story. The small town of Mapleton, Minnesota, had seen its share of hardships, but few stories had touched its residents quite like Lily Thompson's. With a population just shy of 5,000, Mapleton was the kind of place where neighbors still brought casseroles during tough times, and children played freely until the street lights came on. At least, that's how it had been for Lily before her world collapsed. Lily Thompson was small for her 7 years, with golden curls that framed a heart-shaped face dominated by striking blue eyes. Her father's eyes, people would say. The small scar on her chin, a reminder of the accident that took her parents, often went unnoticed beneath her determined expression. Her worn blue backpack, patched multiple times by her grandmother, contained her most precious possessions, a faded photograph of her parents, a small cloth rabbit missing one ear, and her father's military dog tags, one of which she wore around her neck, the other hanging from Max's collar. Max wasn't just any German shepherd. At 8 years old, with a graying muzzle and watchful eyes, he carried himself with the dignified bearing of his military training. The distinctive scar across his right flank told of battlefield bravery that few in Mapleton understood. What everyone did understand, however, was his unwavering devotion to Lily. Since the day her father had brought him home from deployment 3 years ago, Max had appointed himself her guardian, sleeping outside her bedroom door and following her with vigilant attention. Judge Walter Harrison's reputation preceded him throughout the county. At 60, his stern demeanor and uncompromising adherence to the law had earned him the nickname Iron Walter among court staff. What few knew was that behind his impassive courtroom face lay a man haunted by personal tragedy, the loss of his only son in military service overseas 5 years earlier. The judge lived alone in a large Victorian house at the edge of town, its immaculate exterior masking the emptiness within. Margaret Stevens, director of Sunnyvale Children's Home for the past 15 years, maintained the facility with clinical efficiency. Her perfectly coiffed silver hair and crisp pantsuits projected authority, while her thin-lipped smile never quite reached her calculating eyes. Behind her professional veneer lay ambitions that extended far beyond the welfare of her charges. Sarah Miller, the young court clerk whose compassion often conflicted with courthouse protocol, would become an unexpected ally in Lily's journey. With her warm smile and quiet efficiency, She noticed what others overlooked, especially the vulnerable who passed through the justice system's revolving doors. The rain had been relentless that April evening 3 months ago. Lily remembered how her father had gripped the steering wheel tighter as their sedan navigated the slick country roads back from her piano recital. Her mother had turned around from the passenger seat, smiling proudly. "You played beautifully tonight, sweetheart," she had said, reaching back to squeeze Lily's knee. "Even that tricky part in the middle, you didn't miss a note." In the rear-view mirror, Lily had caught her father's eyes crinkling with pride. "That's my girl," he had said, "stubborn as they come. Once you set your mind to something, nothing stands in your way." Max had been asleep beside her, his large head resting on her lap. The warmth of him had made her drowsy. Despite the excitement of the evening, then came the blinding headlights, the screech of tires on wet asphalt, her father's shout, and her mother's scream. The world had spun violently before everything went black. She woke to the taste of blood and the sound of Max whimpering. The car lay on its side in a ditch. Through the shattered window, rain poured in, mingling with something warm running down her face. Max was nudging her, trying to rouse her fully. Somehow, he'd escaped serious injury. "Mom, Dad." Her small voice had sounded strange to her own ears. The silence that followed told her everything. But her 7-year-old mind refused to accept it. It was Max who led her away from the wreckage. Max, who sat with her in the mud by the roadside until the flashing lights arrived. Max, who refused to leave her side even when the paramedics tried to separate them. Her father's final moments came back to her in fragments, his bloodied hand reaching for hers from the crushed front seat, his labored breathing, his final words, "Max will protect you, Lily. He's trained for it. Don't let them separate you. Promise me." She had promised, clutching his hand until the paramedics gently pulled her away. Life with her grandparents had been a quiet comfort after the chaos of loss. Their small farmhouse on the outskirts of Mapleton smelled of cinnamon and old books. Grandpa Thompson taught her to fish in the creek behind their property, while Grandma brushed her hair each night with 100 strokes, just as she had done for Lily's father when he was a boy. "Your daddy was a hero," Grandma would tell her, working through a stubborn tangle. "And your mama was the smartest woman I ever knew. You've got the best of both in you." Max adapted to farm life with surprising ease, herding the chickens away from Grandma's garden and keeping watch from the porch. For 2 months, Lily had begun to heal, sheltered by her grandparents' unwavering love and Max's constant presence. Then came the morning when Grandpa didn't come down for breakfast. Grandma found him still in bed, his face peaceful but his body cold. The doctor said his heart had simply stopped in the night. Grief had weakened it, he explained gently, speaking to Grandma as if Lily couldn't understand. 3 days later, as distant relatives gathered for the funeral, Grandma collapsed while setting out plates for the reception. The stroke took her quickly. The doctor said, "A mercy," some called it. She couldn't bear to be without him, the neighbors whispered. Married 53 years. Lily understood more than they thought. She knew what it meant when the social worker came with her clipboard and sympathetic smile. No other family members stepped forward to take in a grieving child and her large dog. Her father's only brother lived overseas with his own family, unable to return even for the funerals. "You'll be staying at Sunnyvale Children's Home for a while," the social worker explained, her voice artificially bright. "It's a nice place with other children. You'll make friends there." "And Max?" Lily had asked, her hand automatically finding the dog's fur. The hesitation told her everything. "I'm afraid pets aren't allowed at Sunnyvale, dear. But we'll find a good home for him." "No!" Lily's voice had risen sharply, startling both the social worker and Max. "He's not a pet. He's my family. My dad said we have to stay together." The argument continued all the way to Sunnyvale, with Lily growing increasingly desperate and Max sensing her distress, pressing closer to her side. The sprawling brick building with its institutional green trim looked nothing like a home to Lily. Margaret Stevens met them at the entrance, her critical gaze taking in Lily's tear-stained face, worn clothing, and especially the large German shepherd standing guard beside her. "This must be Lily," she said, not bothering to bend down to the child's level. "And this animal cannot come inside. We have strict health and safety regulations." "His name is Max," Lily said, her small chin jutting defiantly. "He was my dad's military dog. He's trained. He won't hurt anyone." "Nevertheless," Margaret replied coolly, "animals are not permitted. Officer Jenkins will take him to the county animal shelter while we get you settled." What followed was the most painful separation Lily had yet endured. It took 2 staff members to pry her fingers from Max's collar, her screams echoing down the sterile hallways of Sunnyvale. Max had to be muzzled when he growled at the animal control officer, something that had never been necessary before. "He'll be safe there," Margaret assured her with clinical detachment. "Now, let me show you to your dormitory." The days that followed blurred together in a haze of grief. Lily barely spoke, refused to eat, and spent hours staring out the window of the girls' dormitory. The other children gave her a wide berth, unsettled by her hollow-eyed silence. Every night, she clutched her father's dog tag and whispered a promise into the darkness. "I'll find a way back to Max. I promised Dad we'd stay together." What Lily didn't know was that Margaret Stevens had already begun processing paperwork to send her to distant relatives in Alaska, connections so tenuous they barely existed. Behind this efficiency lay a motive darker than mere adherence to protocol, one connected to the property Lily's grandparents had left behind, property that, unbeknownst to Lily, now belonged to her. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, 4 weeks after Lily's arrival at Sunnyvale. She had been hiding in the small library alcove, her refuge from the noisy dining hall, when she overheard Margaret Stevens speaking with a man in a tailored suit just around the corner. "The Thompson girls' placement is nearly finalized," Margaret was saying, her voice hushed but unmistakable. "The relatives in Anchorage have signed the preliminary paperwork. We should have her on a plane by next Monday." "Excellent timing," the man replied. "The developers are eager to close on that property before the summer construction season. Old man Thompson had no idea what that land would be worth today." "Technically, the child owns it now," Margaret said. "But once she's placed out of state with distant family who barely know she exists, obtaining the necessary signatures shouldn't be difficult. The standard guardianship paperwork includes authorization for property management." "And the commission?" the man asked. 15%, as agreed. This could be quite lucrative for both of us." "Mr. Branson." Lily's heart pounded against her ribs. Alaska. Monday. They were sending her away far from Mapleton, far from any chance of seeing Max again. And something about her grandparents' property that these adults were clearly hiding from her. That night, unable to sleep, Lily slipped from her bed and crept to the administrative office. She had noticed earlier that Margaret often left her key ring in her desk when she thought all the children were asleep. With trembling fingers, Lily tried 3 keys before finding one that opened the file cabinet marked TZ. Her file was thicker than she expected. Birth certificate, medical records, school registration, and beneath them all, a sealed envelope with her name written in her father's familiar handwriting. The sight of it made her breath catch. She stuffed it into her pajama pocket and carefully relocked the cabinet before returning to her bed. Under her blankets, with a flashlight borrowed from the maintenance closet, Lily broke the seal on the envelope. "My dearest Lily," her father had written. "If you're reading this, something has happened to me. And you're old enough now to understand some things I couldn't tell you before. Max isn't just a family pet. He was my partner in Afghanistan, the finest military service dog in our unit. He saved my life and the lives of many others, including my commanding officer's son." The letter continued, explaining how Max had been specially trained, how he had earned medals for his service, and how her father had fought to adopt him after his military career ended due to injury. "There's a man you should know about Judge Walter Harrison. His son served with me. If you ever need help and I'm not there, find Judge Harrison. Show him Max's tags. He'll understand." At the bottom of the letter was a photograph her father in uniform, standing beside another soldier and a younger Max, all 3 looking dusty but proud in front of a military helicopter. Written on the back were the words, "Scott Thompson, Lieutenant Michael Harrison, and Max Kandahar, 2015. Lily felt a surge of hope for the first time in weeks. Her father had left her a map, not on paper, but in the connections that existed beyond Sunnyvale's walls. She needed to find Max, and then find this judge. Rosa, the kindly kitchen worker who sometimes slipped Lily extra desserts, became her unexpected ally. "My sister works at the animal shelter," she confided when Lily approached her the next morning. "Your dog is still there. They haven't found a home for him, says he's too sad, won't respond to anyone." "I need to get to him," Lily whispered urgently. "They're sending me to Alaska on Monday." Rosa's eyes widened. "Alaska, Dios mío. That's too far for a little one." She hesitated, glancing around the kitchen. "My brother delivers our food supplies on Thursday mornings. The loading dock door stays open for nearly an hour. If someone small were to slip out, then—" "Could you tell your sister I'm coming for Max?" Lily asked, hope blooming in her chest. Rosa nodded slowly. "I shouldn't be doing this. I could lose my job. But my abuela always said some rules need breaking when a child's heart is at stake." For the next 2 days, Lily planned carefully. She saved portions of her meals, wrapping bread and apples in napkins and hiding them in her pillowcase. She folded her warmest clothes into a tight bundle beneath her mattress. Most importantly, she memorized the directions Rosa had drawn showing the route from Sunnyvale to the animal shelter and from there to the county courthouse. Thursday morning arrived with a thunderstorm that seemed to mirror the tumult in Lily's chest. The rain provided perfect cover, staff hurrying between buildings with heads down, visibility reduced by sheets of water cascading from the gutters. As predicted, the loading dock door stood propped open, while Rosa's brother unloaded crates of produce. "Good luck, pequeña," Rosa whispered as she deliberately dropped a stack of pans, creating a distraction that allowed Lily to slip past the busy workers and out into the storm. The rain soaked her immediately, plastering her blonde curls to her face and neck. Her small backpack, containing everything she could carry, grew heavy as it absorbed water. But Lily pushed forward, Rosa's crude map clutched in her hand, protected somewhat by her sleeve. The animal shelter was 3 miles away, a distance that would have been challenging for a 7-year-old even in good weather. In the storm, with mud sucking at her shoes and rain obscuring her vision, it became an odyssey. Twice she had to hide in roadside ditches as Sunnyvale vans drove past, presumably searching for her. Once, she nearly lost her way when the rain reduced her map to soggy pulp. But Lily Thompson was her father's daughter, stubborn as they come. By mid-morning, exhausted and chilled to the bone, she staggered up to the chain-link fence surrounding the county animal shelter. "Max!" she called, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Max!" From inside the facility came a sudden cacophony of barking, and then one distinct German shepherd howl that Lily would have recognized anywhere. Her heart leapt. Rosa's sister, Elena, was watching for her. The young woman hurried outside with an umbrella, her eyes wide with concern at the sight of the drenched child. "Dios mío, you're soaked through. Come inside quickly before someone sees you." The shelter was warm and smelled of disinfectant and wet dog. Elena led her directly to the back kennels, past rows of barking dogs. In the last enclosure, Max stood with his front paws pressed against the gate, his entire body quivering with recognition. "Max!" Lily cried, dropping to her knees as Elena unlocked the gate. The German shepherd burst forward, nearly knocking Lily over in his eagerness to reach her. His tongue lapped at her face, tasting salt tears and rain as he whined with joy. For several minutes, they remained locked together, the child's arms wrapped around the dog's thick neck, her face buried in his fur. "He hasn't eaten properly since they brought him in," Elena explained softly. "Wouldn't respond to any commands. The supervisor was talking about behavioral issues, saying he might not be adoptable." Lily looked up, alarmed. "What does that mean?" Elena's expression was answer enough. "We have to go," Lily said with sudden urgency. "They're looking for me, and they want to send me to Alaska. I need to find Judge Harrison at the courthouse." "In this storm," Elena looked dubious. "It's another 2 miles at least. My dad said Max and I have to stay together. The judge will help us. He knew my dad in the army." Elena hesitated, then nodded. "Wait here." She disappeared into a back room, returning with a child-sized raincoat and a leash. "These belong to my nephew and our old dog. Take them, and take this too." She pressed a few crumpled bills into Lily's palm. "For food, if you need it." With Max firmly leashed beside her, Lily felt a new determination. The German shepherd seemed transformed by their reunion, his posture alert and protective as they slipped out the shelter's side door and back into the storm. The journey to the courthouse was slower than Lily had anticipated. The rain had intensified, and twice they had to take cover as police cruisers drove past. Max seemed to sense the need for stealth, staying close to buildings and guiding Lily away from main streets. By early afternoon, They stood across from the imposing granite courthouse, its columns and steps looking impossibly grand to Lily's tired eyes. A steady stream of people hurried up and down the steps, holding umbrellas or newspapers over their heads against the rain. "We made it, Max," Lily whispered, clutching her father's dog tag. "Now we just need to find Judge Harrison." They waited for a break in traffic before dashing across the street and up the courthouse steps. At the massive wooden doors, Lily hesitated. What if they wouldn't let Max inside? What if they called Sunnyvale immediately? What if Judge Harrison wasn't even there? As if sensing her doubt, Max pressed against her leg reassuringly. Lily took a deep breath and pushed open the heavy door. The courthouse interior was cavernous and echoing, with marble floors that magnified every footstep. A security checkpoint stood just inside the entrance, staffed by a uniformed officer who looked up sharply at the sight of a bedraggled child and a large dog dripping water onto the pristine floor. "Whoa there, young lady," the officer said, rising from his seat. "Dogs aren't allowed in the courthouse except for official service animals." "Please," Lily began, her voice trembling. "I need to find Judge Harrison. It's an emergency." "Judge Harrison is in session right now," the officer replied, his expression softening slightly as he took in her desperate appearance. "Court case 217 third floor. But you can't go in there with that dog, and you can't interrupt a trial." Lily clutched Max's leash tighter. "He was my dad's military dog. I have to see the judge. Please." The officer looked uncertain, glancing between the child and the German shepherd, who was sitting perfectly at attention despite being soaking wet. Something about the dog's bearing gave the man pause. "What's your name, kid?" he asked. "Lily Thompson. My dad was Scott Thompson. He served with Judge Harrison's son." Recognition flickered in the officer's eyes. "Wait here," he said, picking up a phone. "Don't move." "Okay, I'll see what I can do." But as the officer turned to make his call, the courthouse doors burst open again. Margaret Stevens strode in, flanked by 2 police officers. "There she is," Margaret exclaimed, pointing directly at Lily. "That's the runaway from Sunnyvale. She stole files and broke into our administrative offices before fleeing." Lily felt the blood drain from her face. Max growled low in his throat, sensing her fear. "Run, Max," she whispered. And without hesitation, they bolted past the security desk, up the grand staircase, and into the unknown depths of Springfield County Courthouse, with the sound of pursuit echoing behind them. Lily's heart hammered against her ribs as she and Max raced down the marble corridor of the 3rd floor. Behind them, she could hear Margaret Stevens' sharp voice echoing through the stairwell, accompanied by the heavier footfalls of the security officers. Max stayed close to her side, his nails clicking against the polished floor, his body a protective barrier between Lily and anyone they passed. They rounded a corner, coming face to face with a young woman carrying a stack of legal folders. She had kind eyes and auburn hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her name tag read Sarah Miller, court clerk. "Goodness!" Sarah exclaimed, taking in the sight of the breathless child and the large, alert German shepherd. "Are you lost?" "Please?" Lily gasped. "I need to find Judge Harrison. My dad knew his son in the army. I have to show him—" She fumbled for the dog tag around her neck. Sarah's expression shifted from surprise to concern as she registered Lily's desperation. "Judge Harrison is in courtroom 3, but he's in the middle of— They're trying to take Max away from me." Lily interrupted, the words tumbling out. "They want to send me to Alaska, and my dad said we have to stay together. Please, before they find us." The voices grew louder. "Check every courtroom," Margaret Stevens commanded. "That dog is dangerous and the child is unstable." Something in Lily's pleading eyes must have reached Sarah. With a quick glance down the hallway, she made a decision. "Come with me," she said, guiding them toward a side door marked "Staff Only." The small room behind it was lined with filing cabinets and smelled of coffee and paper. "Wait here. Don't make a sound. I'll try to get word to Judge Harrison." The moment Sarah disappeared, Lily collapsed onto the floor beside Max, burying her face in his damp fur. The German shepherd licked her cheek once, then sat at attention, ears pricked toward the door. "We're so close, Max," Lily whispered. "Remember what Dad said? Show Judge Harrison the tags. He'll help us. He has to." While they waited, Lily's mind drifted back to the days when Max had first come to live with them. She'd been only 4 then, but the memory remained vivid, her father arriving home in his uniform, kneeling down to her level. "Lily Pad," he'd said, using his special nickname for her. "I've brought someone very important home to meet you. This is Max. He saved my life and the lives of many of my friends in Afghanistan." The Max of 3 years ago had been sleeker, his muzzle free of the gray that now peppered it. He had approached her cautiously that first day, sniffing her extended hand before giving it a gentle lick. "He's very special," her father had explained. "Max is trained to protect people, to find things, and to be brave even when he's scared, just like we try to be." That night, to her mother's surprise, Max had settled outside Lily's bedroom door rather than with her father. "He's chosen his post," her father had said with a smile. "Military dogs are like that once they decide who needs protection. They're completely devoted." From that day forward, Max had been Lily's constant companion, walking her to the school bus each morning and waiting by the mailbox each afternoon for her return. He seemed to have an uncanny ability to sense her moods, pressing close when she was sad and romping playfully when she was happy. The door to the filing room opened. Snapping Lily back to the present, Sarah slipped inside, her expression tense. "They're searching the building for you," she whispered. "Margaret Stevens is telling everyone you stole confidential files and that the dog attacked someone at the children's home." "That's not true," Lily protested, her eyes filling with tears. "Max would never hurt anyone unless they were hurting me. And I only took my dad's letter. It was addressed to me." Sarah knelt to Lily's level. "I believe you. There's something not right about all this. Judge Harrison is hearing a custody case right now, but it should be wrapping up soon. I think I can get you into the courtroom. But—" She hesitated, looking at Max. "He has to come with me," Lily said firmly. "My dad said we have to stay together. It was his last promise." Sarah bit her lip, clearly conflicted. "The judge is very strict about his courtroom. No disruptions, no exceptions. But—" She studied Max more carefully, noting his disciplined posture. "Was he really a military dog?" "The best in Dad's unit," Lily said proudly, holding up her father's dog tag. He has medals and everything. Dad's letter says he saved Judge Harrison's son. Sarah's eyes widened at this information. Michael Harrison, she breathed. The judge's son who died overseas. She seemed to make a decision. All right. When I give you the signal, come through that door there. It leads directly into the back of the courtroom. But you'll need to be absolutely quiet until the current case concludes. While they waited, Sarah did something unexpected. She dug into her purse and produced a hairbrush, a small towel, and a granola bar. You'll make a better impression if you're not quite so wind-blown, she said gently, helping Lily dry her hair and brush out the tangles. She even had a small towel for Max, who submitted to the grooming with military stillness. Why are you helping us? Lily asked, mouth full of granola. Sarah's smile held a touch of sadness. My brother was in foster care for a while when we were kids. Some places were good, some weren't. I learned that sometimes the system needs a little nudging to do what's right. 20 minutes later, Sarah opened the side door and beckoned. Now, she whispered, quietly. The courtroom was imposing, rich wooden paneling, high ceilings, and rows of spectator seating that were currently half filled with observers. At the front, elevated on a platform, sat Judge Walter Harrison. Even from the back of the room, Lily could see that he was a stern-looking man with silver hair and bushy eyebrows. He was speaking in a deep, authoritative voice. And so, given the evidence presented, the court grants full custody to the maternal grandparents, with visitation rights for the father as outlined in Appendix B. Court is adjourned. The crack of his gavel echoed through the room. People began to rise, gathering papers and whispering to one another. This was her chance. With Max at her side, Lily stepped forward into the aisle. The German shepherd, sensing the importance of the moment, walked with perfect heel position, head held high, every inch the military service dog he had once been. People noticed them immediately. A murmur ran through the courtroom as heads turned. The bailiff stepped forward with a frown, but before he could intercept them, the main doors at the back of the courtroom burst open. There she is. Margaret Stevens' voice cut through the murmurs. Stop that child and contain that animal. It was now or never. Lily broke into a run, Max keeping perfect pace beside her. They reached the front of the courtroom just as two security officers entered from the back. Your Honor! Lily's voice rang out, high and clear despite her fear. Please help us. My name is Lily Thompson. My father was Scott Thompson, and he served with your son Michael in Afghanistan. This is Max. He saved them both. The courtroom froze. Judge Harrison, who had been gathering his papers, looked up sharply. His piercing blue eyes, so similar to those of the man in her father's photograph, fixed on Lily, then shifted to Max. Young lady, he began sternly, this is highly irregular. Please, Lily interrupted, an act that caused gasps among the court staff. No one interrupted Judge Harrison. They want to separate us and send me to Alaska. Dad said Max and I have to stay together. It was his last promise. With trembling fingers, she held up the dog tag around her neck. Dad said to show you this. He said you'd understand. Judge Harrison's face had gone very still. He rose from his seat, descended the steps from the bench, and approached Lily slowly. as if in a trance. The security officers, who had been advancing, hesitated at a sharp gesture from the bailiff. The judge knelt, bringing himself to Lily's level, an unprecedented action that caused more murmuring among the spectators. He reached out, gently taking the dog tag from Lily's small hand. His fingers traced the embossed information: Thompson, Scott A., U.S. Army Special Forces. "And the dog," he said, his voice suddenly hoarse. "You say this is Max the Max from Afghanistan?" In answer, Max stepped forward and sat at perfect attention before the judge, his intelligent eyes fixed on the older man's face. There was recognition there, impossible but undeniable. Judge Harrison reached out a hesitant hand toward the German shepherd. "Delta Sigma," he said quietly, words that meant nothing to Lily but clearly meant something to Max. The dog immediately lay down, placed his head on his paws, and gave a soft whine. The color drained from the judge's face. "It is you," he whispered, "after all these years. Your Honor." Margaret Stevens had reached the front of the courtroom, 2 police officers trailing behind her. This child ran away from a state license facility, stole confidential records, and is traveling with a dangerous animal. We have orders to return her immediately to Sunnyvale Children's Home. Judge Harrison rose slowly to his feet, his expression transformed. The kindness that had briefly softened his features vanished, replaced by the stern authority that had earned him his fearsome reputation. "Ms. Stevens," he said coldly, "you will take no further action regarding this child without direct orders from this court." "But, Your Honor," Margaret protested, "I have legal custody. You have temporary placement authority," the judge corrected sharply. "Which is now under review. Bailiff, please escort Ms. Stevens and her associates to Conference Room 2. They are to remain there until I have had a chance to speak with Miss Thompson privately." "Judge Harrison," one of the police officers began. "We have orders." "In this courthouse, officer," the judge interrupted. "My orders supersede all others. Are we clear?" The authority in his voice left no room for argument. Margaret Stevens was led away, her face flushed with anger and something else, fear. Lily thought. "Miss Miller?" Judge Harrison addressed Sarah, who had been watching from near the clerk's desk. "Please take Miss Thompson and Max to my chambers. Provide them with whatever refreshments they need. I'll join you shortly after I make some calls." Sarah gently guided Lily and Max toward a side door. As they left the courtroom, Lily heard the judge addressing the remaining spectators. "Court is adjourned. Those with business before this court should consult the clerk for rescheduling." The judge's chambers were nothing like Lily had imagined. Instead of the austere, intimidating space she expected, the room was warm and surprisingly comfortable. Bookshelves lined the walls, family photographs adorned his desk, and a worn leather couch sat beneath the window. Most striking was a shadow box on the wall containing military medals and a photograph of a young man in uniform, Lieutenant Michael Harrison. Sarah brought them water and found a bowl for Max, who drank thirstily before settling at Lily's feet, alert but calm. Lily's eyes were drawn to the photographs on the judge's desk, Michael in his uniform. Michael as a young boy with a fishing rod. Michael with his arm around a younger version of Judge Harrison. "He looks like a nice person," Lily said quietly when Sarah returned with a sandwich for her. Sarah followed her gaze to the photographs. "He was," she said softly. Everyone loved Lieutenant Harrison. His death hit the judge very hard. He used to be different, still strict, but warmer somehow. After Michael died, he became more focused on rules, less on people. Before Lily could respond, the door opened and Judge Harrison entered. He had removed his judicial robes and now wore just his suit, making him seem slightly less imposing. "Thank you, Miss Miller," he said. "You may return to your duties. Please ensure we're not disturbed." Once Sarah had left, the judge sat not behind his desk but in an armchair across from Lily. For a long moment he simply studied her, his gaze moving from her face to Max and back again. "Your father was Scott Thompson," he said finally. It wasn't a question. Lily nodded. "He died 3 months ago. Car accident. Mom, too." "I'm very sorry to hear that," the judge said, and his voice held genuine regret. "Captain Thompson was an exceptional soldier. He and my son served together in the Special Forces K-9 unit." "Dad's letter said Max saved them both," Lily said. "During a mission." Judge Harrison's gaze shifted to Max, who was watching him intently. "Yes," he said quietly. "There was an ambush. Max detected the explosives before anyone else could. He gave them enough warning to take cover. Not everyone made it out. But without Max—" He trailed off, lost in memory. "Your father adopted Max after his service ended." Lily nodded. "Max was injured too. Dad said they healed together. He always said Max chose to protect me from the first day." "Military dogs are like that," the judge murmured, echoing her father's words from years ago. "Once they decide who needs protection, they're completely devoted." A silence fell between them, not uncomfortable but weighted with shared connection. "Now," Judge Harrison said finally, his tone becoming more businesslike, "tell me exactly what's been happening at Sunnyvale, and why Ms. Stevens is in such a hurry to send you to Alaska." Lily took a deep breath and told him everything: her parents' death, her brief time with her grandparents, their passing, her separation from Max, and the conversation she had overheard about her grandparents' property. As she spoke, the judge's expression grew increasingly grave. "May I see the letter from your father?" he asked when she finished. Lily hesitated only briefly before reaching into her backpack and pulling out the now crumpled envelope. The judge read it carefully, his eyes lingering on the photograph of the three of them in Afghanistan. "I remember this day," he said softly. "Michael had just been promoted. He called me that night, so proud to be serving with Captain Thompson's unit." He returned the letter to Lily with care. "Your father was right to tell you to find me. I believe there's something very wrong with how your case has been handled." He crossed to his desk and pressed a button on his phone. "Janet, get me Judge Simmons in family court, and then call Lieutenant Morrison at County Police. I need background checks on Margaret Stevens and the entire administrative staff at Sunnyvale Children's Home, priority status. Also, pull the property records for the Thompson farm in Mapleton." He turned back to Lily, his expression softening. "You've been very brave, young lady, braver than many adults I've seen in my courtroom. I promise you this, I will get to the bottom of what's happening. And until then, you and Max will not be separated again." For the first time since entering the courthouse, Lily felt the knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. Max seemed to sense it too, his posture relaxing slightly as he leaned against her leg. "Can we really stay together?" she asked, hardly daring to believe it. Judge Harrison nodded solemnly. You have my word as an officer of the court." He hesitated, then added more gently, "and as someone who understands what it means to lose family." As if on cue, there was a sharp knock at the door, and Sarah Miller entered, her expression urgent. "Your Honor, Margaret Stevens is attempting to leave the building, claiming she has an emergency at Sunnyvale. And there's a man named James Branson in the lobby asking for her. He seems very agitated." "Branson," Lily piped up. "That's the man she was talking to about my grandparents' property." Judge Harrison's eyebrows rose. He reached for his phone again. "Janet, tell security to detain Margaret Stevens and a man named James Branson. They are not to leave the building under any circumstances." He turned to Sarah. "Miss Miller, please ask Judge Simmons if she can convene an emergency placement hearing in her chambers immediately. Tell her it's regarding possible fraud in a minor's guardianship case." As Sarah hurried out, the judge looked down at Lily with newfound determination. "It seems, Miss Thompson, that you've stumbled onto something much bigger than a dispute about keeping your dog, and I think it's time we find out exactly what Margaret Stevens has been hiding." 2 hours later, Courtroom 2 had been hastily converted for an emergency hearing. Unlike the formal proceedings of regular court, this session had been arranged with remarkable speed, a testament to the gravity with which Judge Harrison viewed the situation. Judge Harriet Simmons, a formidable woman in her late 50s who presided over family court matters, sat at the bench. The normally public gallery contained only essential personnel: a court reporter, 2 bailiffs, Sarah Miller taking notes, and a stern-faced woman in a navy suit who had been introduced as Diane Foster from the State Child Welfare Oversight Committee. Lily sat at a small table to the right, with Judge Harrison beside her, acting not as a judge, but as a temporary advocate. Max lay at her feet, the very picture of disciplined calm. Across the aisle, Margaret Stevens sat rigidly beside a hastily appointed public defender, her normally immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. James Branson, a balding man with an expensive suit and nervous hands, occupied the seat behind her. "This emergency hearing is now in session," Judge Simmons announced, her voice crisp and authoritative. "We are here to review the placement and guardianship status of minor child Lily Thompson, age 7, following allegations of improper procedure and potential misconduct in her case management." She peered over her reading glasses. "I must note for the record that the presence of the canine is highly irregular, but given the unique circumstances and the animal's apparent military training, I'm allowing it for now." Max's ears twitched at the mention of his presence, but he remained perfectly still. "Let's begin with the facts," Judge Simmons continued. "Ms. Stevens, as director of Sunnyvale Children's Home, you took custody of Lily Thompson following the death of her grandparents approximately 5 weeks ago, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Margaret replied, her voice steady but lacking its usual authority. "And at that time, were you made aware that the child's only living relative in the country was unwilling or unable to take custody? Her uncle is stationed overseas with his family. He was contacted, but declined guardianship. And then you initiated placement proceedings with relatives in Alaska." Margaret shifted in her seat. "Yes, Your Honor. Distant cousins of her maternal grandmother." Judge Simmons consulted a document before her. "Interesting, because according to records obtained in the last hour, these relatives, Martin and Clara Wilson, don't appear to exist at the address provided in your paperwork." A murmur ran through the small assembly. Margaret's face remained impassive, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the table. Furthermore, Judge Simmons continued, there appears to be no record of the required home study for these proposed guardians, nor any documentation of their relationship to the child. There must be some mistake in the records, Margaret began, but Judge Simmons cut her off with a raised hand. Ms. Stevens, I advise you to consider your responses carefully. Presenting false information to this court has serious consequences. She turned her attention to Lily. Young lady, can you tell me in your own words what happened after you arrived at Sunnyvale? Lily straightened in her chair, drawing strength from Max's solid presence at her feet. In a clear voice that occasionally trembled but never faltered, she recounted her experiences, the separation from Max, her discovery of her father's letter, and, most importantly, the conversation she had overheard between Margaret Stevens and James Branson regarding her grandparents' property. As she spoke, Lily noticed James Branson growing increasingly agitated, wiping sweat from his forehead and repeatedly checking his watch. Margaret Stevens' composure was cracking as well, her expression hardening into something cold and defensive. When Lily finished, Judge Simmons nodded thoughtfully. Thank you, Lily. You've been very brave and very clear. She turned to Judge Harrison. Your Honor, you've taken a personal interest in this case. Would you care to explain why? Judge Harrison rose, his presence commanding even without his judicial robes. I knew this child's father, Captain Scott Thompson, through my son, Lieutenant Michael Harrison. They served together in Afghanistan with the military working dog now present in this courtroom. His voice grew slightly hoarse. The animals saved both their lives during an insurgent attack, though my son later died in a separate incident. Captain Thompson adopted the dog, Max, after they were both wounded in action. He produced a folder. I've taken the liberty of verifying the military service records, which confirm these facts. I've also ordered a preliminary title search on the Thompson family property in Mapleton. He handed the documents to the bailiff, who passed them to Judge Simmons. What these records show, Judge Harrison continued, is that following the deaths of Harold and Martha Thompson, their property, approximately 15 acres, including waterfront access on Lake Mapleton, passed to their only heir, Lily Thompson. The executor of the estate is First Midwest Bank, but any decisions regarding the property would require the signature of Lily's legal guardian. Judge Simmons examined the documents, her expression growing grave. And what is the approximate value of this property? Judge Harrison. According to recent comparable sales, between $2 and $3 million, the lakefront portion is particularly valuable due to limited development opportunities in the area. A shocked silence fell over the courtroom. Lily's eyes widened. She had no concept of such sums, only that it was apparently enough money to make adults behave very badly. I see, Judge Simmons said finally. Mr. Branson, I understand you're a real estate developer with interests in the Mapleton area. James Branson seemed to shrink in his seat. Yes, Your Honor, my company, Branson Development, has several projects in the region. And would you care to explain your interest in the Thompson property and the nature of your relationship with Miss Stevens? Before Branson could answer, his attorney, who had been silently observing until now, intervened. Your Honor, we request a brief recess to confer with our client before he responds to questions that may have criminal implications. Granted, Judge Simmons replied. You have 15 minutes. This court is in recess. As the bailiff escorted Branson and his attorney out, Margaret Stevens leaned toward her public defender, her face pale but her eyes hard with calculation. Lily couldn't hear what they were saying, but the defender's repeated head-shaking suggested he was not offering the answers she wanted. Judge Harrison turned to Lily. "You're doing very well," he said quietly. "The truth is coming out, just as it should." "What will happen to me after this?" Lily asked, the question that had been weighing on her since they entered the courtroom. Before Judge Harrison could answer, Sarah Miller approached their table, a tablet computer in hand. "Your Honor," she said urgently, "Lieutenant Morrison just sent this over. You need to see it immediately." Judge Harrison reviewed whatever was on the screen, his expression darkening. "How many cases?" he asked sharply. "At least 7 that they've identified so far." Sarah replied, "All involving children with inherited property or insurance settlements." "Get Morrison in here as soon as we reconvene," Harrison instructed. "And contact the district attorney's office." When court resumed 15 minutes later, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. Lieutenant Morrison, a tall officer with a detective's badge, had joined them, sitting directly behind Judge Harrison and Lily. James Branson returned, looking defeated, while Margaret Stevens had the tightly controlled expression of someone preparing for battle. "Before we continue," Judge Simmons announced, "I've been made aware of new evidence that may have bearing on this and potentially other cases involving Sunnyvale Children's Home. Lieutenant Morrison, please approach." The police detective stepped forward, carrying a folder that he presented to the judge. "Your Honor, following Judge Harrison's request for background information on Miss Stevens and Sunnyvale Children's Home, we conducted a preliminary financial investigation. We've discovered a pattern of suspicious property transactions involving at least 7 former wards of Sunnyvale, all of whom had inherited property or assets." He turned to face the small gallery. "In each case, the child was placed with distant relatives or foster homes far from their original community. In each case, property belonging to the child was subsequently sold, with Margaret Stevens acting as facilitator through her position at Sunnyvale. And in each case, Mr. James Branson's development company purchased the properties at below market value." The revelation sent a ripple of shock through the courtroom. Diane Foster from the Oversight Committee was furiously taking notes, her expression thunderous. "Furthermore," Lieutenant Morrison continued, "our forensic accountants have identified substantial deposits to an offshore account linked to Ms. Stevens following each transaction. We're still gathering evidence, but we believe this constitutes a pattern of fraud and exploitation of minors in state care." Margaret Stevens finally broke. "This is absurd," she exclaimed, half rising from her chair. "Those placements were all approved by the proper authorities. The property sales were legal and documented." "Were they?" Judge Simmons asked coldly. "Because the paperwork we've reviewed in Lily Thompson's case contains numerous irregularities, including falsified signatures and non-existent relatives. Lieutenant Morrison, are you prepared to take action based on your findings?" "Yes, Your Honor. We have arrest warrants for both Margaret Stevens and James Branson on charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, exploitation of minors, and falsification of state records." What followed happened so quickly that Lily barely had time to process it. Margaret Stevens, seeing the inevitable, made a desperate dash for the door. Max, who had been lying quietly throughout the proceedings, reacted with military precision. Without growling or showing any aggression, he bounded forward and positioned himself in the doorway, effectively blocking her escape route. He simply stood there, tall and immovable, until the bailiffs reached her. As they led a defeated Margaret Stevens away in handcuffs, with James Branson following under separate escort, Judge Simmons turned her attention back to Lily. "Young lady, I want you to know that what you did bringing this to the attention of the court was not only brave, but has likely protected other children from similar exploitation. You should be very proud." Lily nodded, feeling overwhelmed by the day's events. Max returned to her side, pressing reassuringly against her leg. "Now, as to your immediate custody situation," Judge Simmons continued, "given the extraordinary circumstances, we need to establish a temporary guardianship while more permanent arrangements are considered. Normally, we would place you with another foster facility, but given the concerns raised about Sunnyvale and your special circumstances with your service animal, I'm inclined to consider alternatives." She glanced at Judge Harrison. "Your Honor, do you have any suggestions?" Judge Harrison cleared his throat. "Your Honor, if the court permits, I would like to petition for temporary guardianship of Lily Thompson and her service animal. Max, I have a prior connection to her family through military service. I'm familiar with the needs of military working dogs, and I can provide a stable environment while more permanent arrangements are explored." The request sent a shock of hope through Lily. She looked up at Judge Harrison, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Judge Simmons considered the request thoughtfully. "This is also highly irregular. Judge Harrison, you have no prior experience as a foster parent, and there would normally be home studies and extensive paperwork before such a placement." "I understand, Your Honor. However, these are extraordinary circumstances. The child has already been victimized by the system that was meant to protect her. I believe stability and continuity are paramount at this moment, and I'm in a position to provide both." Diane Foster from the Oversight Committee spoke up for the first time. "Given the gross mishandling of this case by conventional channels, I would support an emergency placement with Judge Harrison, provided the standard follow-up evaluations are conducted. The child's welfare must be our primary concern, and further disruption should be minimized." Judge Simmons nodded slowly. "Very well. This court hereby grants temporary guardianship of Lily Thompson to Judge Walter Harrison for a period of 30 days, during which time the standard home evaluations and background checks will be conducted." She looked directly at Lily. "Young lady, are you comfortable with this arrangement?" Lily looked up at Judge Harrison, then down at Max, who was watching her with those intelligent eyes that had seen her through so much already. She thought of her father's words in his letter, "Find Judge Harrison. Show him Max's tags. He'll understand." "Yes, Your Honor," she said clearly. "My dad trusted Judge Harrison, and so does Max." Judge Simmons smiled, the first real smile Lily had seen from her. "Then it's settled. This court stands adjourned until the follow-up hearing scheduled for 30 days from today." She brought down her gavel with a decisive crack. As people began to rise and gather their things, Judge Harrison knelt beside Lily's chair, bringing himself to her eye level. "Lily," he said gently, "I want you to know that I take this responsibility very seriously. Your father was a man of honor who saved my son's life more than once. I couldn't protect Michael in the end, but I promise you this: I will do everything in my power to protect you and Max, just as your father would have wanted." For the first time since entering the courthouse, perhaps for the first time since losing her parents. Lily felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, things might be all right again someday. The jubilation of the courtroom victory was short-lived. As Lily, Max, and Judge Harrison descended the courthouse steps that evening, a county vehicle pulled up to the curb. A woman in a gray suit emerged, her expression professionally neutral as she approached them. "Judge Harrison," she said with a curt nod. "I'm Beverly Wilson, Deputy Director of County Child Services. I've been sent to implement the transition plan for Lily Thompson." Judge Harrison's posture stiffened. "The court has already ruled on this matter, Ms. Wilson. Lily has been placed in my temporary custody pending home evaluations." Beverly's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm aware of Judge Simmons's ruling. However, our department has concerns about the irregular nature of this placement. Until your home has been properly evaluated and certified, we believe the child should be housed at our secure residential facility." "That's preposterous," Judge Harrison replied, his voice low but firm. "Judge Simmons specifically ordered that Lily remain in my care to prevent further disruption." "With all due respect, Your Honor," Beverly countered, "you're not a licensed foster parent. There are protocols that must be followed, regardless of your position, particularly given the irregularities already surrounding this case." Lily felt the ground shifting beneath her feet yet again. She pressed closer to Max, whose body had tensed, sensing her distress. "This is Margaret Stevens' doing, isn't it?" Judge Harrison asked sharply. "Even in custody, she still has allies in the system." Beverly's expression tightened. "I'm simply following departmental procedures, Judge. Now, if you'll just step aside, I need to take Lily to our facility. The dog, unfortunately, cannot accompany her." "No!" Lily cried, gripping Max's collar. "We can't be separated again. The judge promised." Judge Harrison placed a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. "You're not taking this child anywhere. Ms. Wilson, I'm going to call Judge Simmons right now, and we'll sort this out properly." "That's your prerogative," Beverly replied coolly. "But in the meantime, I have a legal obligation to secure the child in an approved facility." She gestured toward the county vehicle, where a male colleague waited. It was a standoff, and Lily could feel the tension crackling in the air. Max stood rigid beside her, not growling but alert and protective, his body positioned between Lily and the county workers. Sarah Miller, who had followed them out of the courthouse, stepped forward. "Judge Harrison, if I may, perhaps we should call Lieutenant Morrison. Given the investigation into Ms. Stevens and the concerns about corruption within the system, he might want to verify Ms. Wilson's orders." Judge Harrison nodded tersely. "An excellent suggestion, Miss Miller." Beverly Wilson's confident expression faltered slightly. "That won't be necessary. That won't be. I assure you my orders come directly from the department head." "All the more reason to verify them," Judge Harrison replied, already dialing his phone. The tension ratcheted higher as they waited. Lily's stomach churned with anxiety. Just when it seemed they had won, just when safety was within reach, another obstacle had emerged. Would it always be like this? Would someone always be trying to take Max away, to send her somewhere far from anything familiar? Judge Harrison's phone conversation was brief but intense. When he hung up, his expression was grim, but determined. "Lieutenant Morrison is on his way," he informed them. "He's very interested in learning who authorized this action, given that the investigation into Sunnyvale and the county placement system is still active." Beverly Wilson's professional facade began to crack. "Judge Harrison, I'm simply doing my job." "The department has concerns." "The department," Judge Harrison interrupted, "is currently under investigation for potentially criminal mishandling of vulnerable children's cases. I suggest you consider very carefully whether you want to be associated with those actions." 20 tense minutes later, Lieutenant Morrison's unmarked police car pulled up to the courthouse steps. The detective's expression was thunderous as he approached. "Ms. Wilson," he said without preamble, "I've just spoken with your department head, who claims to have no knowledge of any order to remove Lily Thompson from Judge Harrison's custody. Perhaps you'd like to explain." The color drained from Beverly Wilson's face. "There must be some miscommunication. I received a direct order from Director Phillips this afternoon." "That's interesting," Morrison replied. "Considering Director Phillips has been in conference with the State Attorney General's office since noon. I just left him there myself." What followed was a blur to Lily Beverly Wilson being escorted to Lieutenant Morrison's car for questioning, urgent phone calls, adults speaking in hushed, angry tones. Through it all, Judge Harrison kept one hand firmly on her shoulder, a solid anchor in the storm. "It seems," Lieutenant Morrison explained later as they sat in his office, "that Margaret Stevens has more accomplices than we initially realized. Ms. Wilson has worked closely with her on several previous cases involving valuable property. We're still unraveling the extent of the network." "What happens now?" Judge Harrison asked, his voice weary. Morrison sighed. "The investigation is expanding by the hour. We've uncovered evidence suggesting this scheme has been operating for at least 5 years. Multiple children, multiple properties, millions of dollars diverted through various channels." He glanced at Lily, who was half asleep against Max's warm side, then lowered his voice. "Some of the children were sent as far away as Alaska and Hawaii, places where they'd have no connections, no way to question what was happening to their inheritances. And the State Attorney General taking a personal interest. This could be one of the largest cases of systematic exploitation of orphaned children in state history." Judge Harrison ran a hand over his face. "What about Lily's placement? I can't have her living in fear that someone will come for her tomorrow or the next day." Morrison leaned forward. "Judge Simmons has issued an enhanced protective order. No one, and I mean no one, can remove Lily from your custody without her direct, in-person authorization. She's also expediting the guardianship evaluation process. Given the circumstances, she's taking extraordinary measures to ensure Lily's security." That night, exhausted beyond words, Lily finally arrived at Judge Harrison's home. The large Victorian house loomed in the darkness, its many windows glowing with warm light. It was grand, but somehow lonely. Lily thought a bit like the judge himself. "It's not much," Judge Harrison said awkwardly as he unlocked the front door. "I haven't had guests in quite some time." Despite his disclaimer, the house was immaculate, with polished hardwood floors, antique furniture, and walls lined with bookshelves. It was formal, yes, but not unwelcoming. Max padded in cautiously, nose twitching as he surveyed this new territory. "The guest room is upstairs." Judge Harrison continued, leading the way. It was Michael's room, but, well, it's been redecorated since then. The room he showed her was clearly meant for an adult guest, with a queen-sized bed, heavy curtains, and a writing desk by the window. But someone, Sarah Miller, Lily suspected, had made a hasty effort to make it more child-friendly. A colorful quilt lay folded at the foot of the bed, and a small stuffed bear sat on the pillow. "I know it's not ideal," Judge Harrison said, noticing her hesitation. "Tomorrow we can discuss what changes would make you more comfortable." Lily nodded tiredly. It wasn't home. Not her parents' home with its familiar sounds and smells, nor her grandparents' farmhouse with its creaking floors and apple-scented kitchen. But it wasn't Sunnyvale either, with its institutional coldness and strict separations. And most importantly, Max was here, already circling the plush rug beside the bed, preparing to take up his customary protective position. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for believing me about Max." Something in Judge Harrison's stern face softened. "Max earned my trust long before today, and you've shown extraordinary courage, young lady. Your father would be very proud." After a simple dinner of sandwiches and soup, apparently the limits of Judge Harrison's culinary abilities, Lily found herself struggling to keep her eyes open. The events of the day, coming after her harrowing escape and journey to the courthouse, had depleted her last reserves of energy. Judge Harrison, noticing her exhaustion, gently suggested she get some rest. "Tomorrow will be soon enough to sort everything else out," he said, showing her where the bathroom was and providing a new toothbrush still in its packaging. That night, as Lily curled up in the unfamiliar bed, she felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. Yes, she had won a victory today. Yes, she and Max were together again. But for how long? What new threats might emerge tomorrow? The past months had taught her how quickly security could vanish, how easily promises could be broken. As if sensing her thoughts, Max rose from his position on the floor and jumped onto the bed, settling his warm weight against her side. Normally, she knew, dogs weren't allowed on beds. Her mother had been strict about that rule. But tonight, in this strange place, she couldn't bring herself to send him back to the floor. His steady heartbeat and familiar scent were the only constants in her shifting world. "We're going to be okay, Max," she whispered, burying her fingers in his thick fur. "We have to be." She was nearly asleep when a soft knock came at the door. Judge Harrison entered, carrying a glass of water. "I thought you might," he began, then stopped, noticing Max on the bed. For a moment, Lily tensed, expecting a reprimand. Instead, the judge simply placed the water on the nightstand. "Military working dogs are trained to protect at all costs," he said quietly. "Max knows what you need right now, better than any of us." He reached out hesitantly, then patted Max's head with surprising gentleness. "Good dog," he murmured. "Good boy." As he turned to leave, Lily found her voice. "Judge Harrison, do you think they'll try again to take me away? I mean—" The judge paused in the doorway, his silhouette outlined against the hallway light. "I won't lie to you, Lily," Margaret Stevens has friends in powerful places. The investigation is just beginning, and we don't yet know how far this network extends." He turned back to face her. "But I promise you this, I will fight with every legal tool at my disposal to keep you safe. And I suspect Max would do the same in his own way." It wasn't the absolute reassurance she'd hoped for, but it was honest. Lily appreciated that. "Try to rest now," Judge Harrison said. "Tomorrow is another day." After he left, Lily lay awake for a long time, listening to the unfamiliar creaks and sighs of the old house, feeling Max's steady breathing beside her. Despite the judge's promise, despite Max's protective presence, a cold kernel of fear remained lodged in her chest. For the first time since her parents' death, Lily Thompson cried herself to sleep, her tears soaking silently into Max's fur as the loyal dog kept his vigil through the long, uncertain night. The following morning brought rain again, a gentle patter against the windows of Judge Harrison's Victorian home. Lily woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until Max's warm weight beside her brought reality rushing back. The events of yesterday, the courtroom, Margaret Stevens' arrest. The confrontation on the courthouse steps swirled through her mind like leaves caught in a storm drain. She found Judge Harrison in the kitchen, awkwardly attempting to prepare breakfast. The stern, authoritative man who commanded respect in the courtroom looked surprisingly human in a rumpled button-down shirt, wrestling with a pancake that refused to flip properly. "Good morning," he said, glancing up as Lily and Max entered. "I hope you like pancakes, or at least, I hope you'll like whatever these turn out to be." His self-deprecating tone brought a small smile to Lily's face. "I can help," she offered. "Grandma taught me how to make pancakes." Together, they salvaged breakfast. The judge seemed relieved to follow Lily's confident instructions on how to test when bubbles at the edges meant it was time to flip. Max settled on the kitchen floor, watching their domestic collaboration with attentive eyes. "I've taken a leave of absence from the bench," Judge Harrison announced as they sat down to eat. "At least for the next few weeks. Lieutenant Morrison believes the investigation into Margaret Stevens and her associates will require my full attention, especially as it pertains to your safety." Lily nodded solemnly, pushing a piece of pancake around her plate. "Are there other kids like me, that they tried to take away from their homes?" The judge's expression darkened. "Yes," he admitted after a moment. "The investigation is still in its early stages, but it appears that several children with valuable inheritances were deliberately placed far from their communities to facilitate the sale of their properties." "Will they get to come back?" Lily asked, thinking of those unknown children, separated from everything familiar, perhaps without even a Max to comfort them. "Lieutenant Morrison and the State Attorney General are working on that now," Judge Harrison replied. "It's complicated, especially for the children who have been in their new placements for years. But justice will be done. Lily, I promise you that." The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. Judge Harrison rose warily, his hand automatically coming to rest on Lily's shoulder. "Stay here," he instructed, moving to answer the door. Lily heard muffled voices. Then Sarah Miller appeared in the kitchen doorway, carrying a large cardboard box and wearing a bright smile that faltered slightly when she noticed the tension in the room. "Good morning," she said. "I hope I'm not interrupting breakfast." Judge Harrison followed her in, looking both relieved and slightly embarrassed at his caution. "Not at all, Miss Miller. We were just finishing—" Sarah set the box on an empty chair. "I thought Lily might need some essentials. There's a change of clothes, some toiletries, a few books, and—" she reached into the box and pulled out a well-loved stuffed rabbit. "This? I picked it up from the lost and found at Sunnyvale last night." "Hoppy!" Lily exclaimed, jumping from her chair to seize the rabbit. It was the stuffed toy her father had given her on her 4th birthday, the one that had disappeared during her hasty transfer to Sunnyvale. She hugged it tightly to her chest, tears springing to her eyes. Sarah smiled. "I thought it might be important." Judge Harrison cleared his throat, clearly moved by Lily's reaction. "Thank you, Miss Miller. That was very thoughtful." Sarah's expression turned more serious. "I also brought this." She extracted a thick folder from her bag. "Lieutenant Morrison asked me to deliver it. It's everything they've uncovered so far about the property scheme." As Sarah and Judge Harrison spread the documents across the kitchen table, Lily retreated to the living room with Max and Hoppy, giving the adults space to talk. But their voices carried, and fragments of their conversation drifted to where she sat, stroking Max's fur. At least 7 properties sold in the last 3 years alone. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Falsified documents with forged signatures. County officials on the payroll. The words meant little to Lily individually, but together they painted a picture of something big and corrupt that had almost swallowed her whole. She hugged Hoppy tighter, grateful for Max's solid presence beside her. After what seemed like hours, Sarah and Judge Harrison emerged from the kitchen, their expressions grim but determined. "Lily," Judge Harrison said gently, "Miss Miller and I need to meet with Lieutenant Morrison and the district attorney this afternoon. Would you be comfortable staying with Officer Parker's wife for a few hours? She's a retired school teacher, and Lieutenant Morrison speaks very highly of her." Lily glanced at Max. "Will Max come too?" "Of course," Sarah assured her. "Mrs. Parker has already been briefed on the situation and is happy to have both of you." Later that afternoon, as Lily and Max settled into the Parkers' cozy bungalow with promises of homemade cookies and Disney movies, Judge Harrison and Sarah headed to the county police headquarters. The information they carried would blow the lid off what was quickly becoming the biggest scandal in county history. The conference room at police headquarters was crowded with serious faces. Lieutenant Morrison, District Attorney Eleanor Patel, 2 FBI agents, and representatives from the State Attorney General's office all sat around a table covered with documents, laptops, and coffee cups. "The scale is even larger than we initially thought," Lieutenant Morrison began without preamble. "Margaret Stevens has been operating this scheme for nearly a decade. We've identified 23 children whose properties were liquidated after they were placed in distant foster homes or with fictional relatives." "And the money?" Judge Harrison asked. District Attorney Patel, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, slid a document across the table. "Approximately $12 million in total property values, with Stevens and her various accomplices skimming about 30%, around $4 million. The primary beneficiary appears to be Branson Development, which acquired prime properties at below-market rates." "Who were her accomplices within the system?" Sarah asked, the question that had been weighing on everyone's minds. Lieutenant Morrison grimaced. That's where it gets ugly. We've identified at least 3 county employees, including Beverly Wilson, who directly facilitated fraudulent placements, 2 judges who rubber-stamped questionable guardianship arrangements without proper scrutiny, and most disturbingly, the previous director of County Child Services, who retired last year to a suspiciously lavish lifestyle in Florida. "What about Director Phillips?" Judge Harrison asked. "The current head of Child Services." "So far, we have no evidence linking him to the scheme," one of the FBI agents replied. "In fact, it appears Stevens was carefully keeping him in the dark, operating through deputies like Wilson who could intercept and redirect cases of interest." "And the children?" Sarah pressed. "What happens to them now?" District Attorney Patel leaned forward. "That's where we need your help, Judge Harrison. As the scheme unravels, we anticipate numerous challenges regarding the current placements of these children. Some have been in their new homes for years. Some have formed attachments. Others, like Lily Thompson, were clearly traumatized by their separations from their communities. We need someone with both legal authority and moral clarity to help navigate these cases." The Attorney General's representative added, "Someone who can't be bought or intimidated." Judge Harrison understood immediately what they were asking. "You want me to oversee the review of all these cases and potentially serve as a special master for the court in determining appropriate remedies?" D.A. Patel confirmed. "It would be a significant undertaking, requiring you to step back from regular judicial duties for perhaps a year." Judge Harrison was silent for a long moment, weighing the implications. Such an assignment would mean putting his career on hold, diving deep into a morass of corruption and human suffering. It would mean facing the worst aspects of a system he had served faithfully for decades. It would also mean extended responsibility for Lily Thompson. The temporary guardianship would need to become something more permanent if he took on this role. "I'll need to think about it," he said finally. "And I'll need to discuss it with Lily. Her life has been disrupted enough already." While the adults deliberated, Lily was experiencing something she hadn't felt in months: normalcy. Mrs. Parker, a grandmotherly woman with silver hair and kind eyes, treated her presence as the most natural thing in the world. She didn't ask probing questions about Lily's ordeal or make pitying comments. Instead, she simply included Lily in her afternoon routine, baking cookies, watering plants on the porch, and eventually settling down to watch The Lion King, which Mrs. Parker confessed was her personal favorite. Even more surprisingly, Mrs. Parker treated Max with the same matter-of-fact acceptance. She provided a bowl of water, asked politely if he had any dietary restrictions, and showed Lily where Max could go outside if needed, when Max positioned himself protectively at Lily's feet during the movie. Mrs. Parker simply smiled and offered them both popcorn. "You know," Mrs. Parker remarked casually during a quiet moment, "my husband James has always been good at seeing the truth in people. When he came home yesterday and told me about you and Max, he said he'd never seen such a clear case of belonging together." Lily looked up, surprised. "He did?" Mrs. Parker nodded. "James has been a courthouse security officer for 20 years. Says he's seen every kind of family situation you can imagine. Some that look perfect on paper but feel all wrong, and some that would never fit the official checkboxes but are exactly right." She smiled warmly at Lily. "He said you and Max were definitely the second kind." Something loosened in Lily's chest at those words, a knot of anxiety she hadn't even realized was there. The Parkers' simple acceptance felt like a cool drink after a long, hot walk. By the time Judge Harrison and Sarah Miller returned that evening, Lily had helped Mrs. Parker prepare dinner, taught Max a new trick involving balancing a cookie on his nose, and felt more like a normal child than she had in months. The adults' expressions were serious as they gathered in the Parkers' living room, but there was also an unmistakable energy of purpose about them. "Lily," Judge Harrison began, kneeling to her level as he had in the courtroom, "something important has happened. The investigation into Margaret Stevens has uncovered many other children who were treated unfairly. Just like you." Lily nodded solemnly. "You told me at breakfast. Kids who lost their homes." "That's right," he continued. "The district attorney and the state officials have asked me to help make things right for all those children. It would be a big job, taking many months." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "It would also mean that our current arrangement, you staying with me, would need to become more permanent. At least for a while." Lily absorbed this, her hand automatically finding Max's fur. "Would we still stay in your house?" "Yes," Judge Harrison confirmed. "In fact, if you're comfortable with the idea, we could make some changes to your room, make it feel more like your own space. And Max stays too." The judge smiled slightly. "I wouldn't dream of separating you. In fact, Lieutenant Morrison has officially designated Max as a service animal, which means he has legal protection to stay with you wherever you go." Sarah Miller leaned forward. "Lily, what Judge Harrison is trying to say is that he's been asked to become your legal guardian for at least the next year. It's a big decision for both of you, and it's okay if you need time to think about it." Lily looked around the room at the adults watching her with varying expressions of concern and hope. For months, her world had been controlled by people who saw her as nothing more than a means to an end, a path to her grandparents' property. These people, by contrast, had fought for her, had believed her story, had respected her bond with Max. "I'd like to stay with Judge Harrison," she said finally. "And I think my dad would like it too, because of what Max did for his son." Judge Harrison's expression softened in a way Lily hadn't seen before. "I believe you're right about that. Lily, your father was a man of honor and loyalty. I can only hope to live up to his example." As the adults continued discussing logistics, Lily felt Max shift closer to her side, for the first time since her parents' accident. The future didn't feel like a looming threat. There were still many uncertainties, still battles to be fought, but she was no longer facing them alone. That night, as Sarah drove them back to Judge Harrison's house, their house now, Lily supposed Max sat alert in the back seat beside her, his intelligent eyes reflecting the passing streetlights. The military dog tags on his collar clinked softly with each turn, a reminder of the strange path that had brought them here. Judge Harrison's phone rang just as they pulled into the driveway. His expression changed as he listened to the caller, shifting from tired contentment to sharp concern. "When?" he asked tersely. "I see. Yes. We'll be careful. Keep me updated." He hung up, turning to Sarah with a grim expression. "Margaret Stevens made bail an hour ago. Someone posted the full amount in cash." The implication hung heavy in the air. Their battle was far from over. Christmas morning dawned crisp and clear. with fresh snow blanketing Judge Harrison's Victorian home and transforming the neighborhood into a holiday postcard. 6 months had passed since that rainy day in the courthouse. 6 months of changes, challenges, and unexpected joys. Lily woke early, as children do on Christmas, and found Max already alert at the foot of her bed. The room around her bore little resemblance to the austere guest room she'd first encountered. Now the walls were painted a cheerful yellow, adorned with framed photographs and colorful artwork. Bookshelves held a growing collection of children's novels and stuffed animals. A handmade quilt, crafted by Mrs. Parker and several other courthouse employees' wives, covered her bed. It was a room that clearly belonged to a child to her. "Merry Christmas, Max," she whispered, reaching to scratch behind his ears. The German shepherd responded with a gentle woof, his tail thumping against the bedspread. They padded downstairs together, Max leading the way with dignified excitement. The transformation of the house hadn't been limited to Lily's bedroom. Throughout the spacious Victorian, signs of life and warmth had gradually appeared, family photographs, including some recovered from her parents' and grandparents' homes, comfortable furniture replacing some of the more formal pieces, and children's books mingling with legal tomes on the bookshelves. The Christmas tree in the living room, adorned with a mixture of Judge Harrison's heirloom ornaments and handmade decorations from Lily's class, glowed with multicolored lights. Beneath it lay a modest collection of wrapped presents. Max immediately went to investigate, his nose twitching with interest. "Not yet, you two," came Judge Harrison's voice from the kitchen doorway. The judge stood there in a plaid bathrobe, holding a mug of coffee and looking more relaxed than Lily had ever seen him in those first tense days. "Breakfast first, then presents? House rules?" Lily smiled at the familiar routine they'd established. "Is Sarah coming for breakfast?" "She'll be here at 9, Judge Harrison confirmed, checking his watch. "Along with the Parkers and Lieutenant Morrison and his wife." Their small Christmas gathering reflected the unexpected community that had formed around them during the past 6 months. Sarah Miller, who had begun as a courthouse clerk trying to help a desperate child, had become a frequent visitor and something of a big sister figure to Lily. The Parkers had adopted the role of surrogate grandparents, with Mrs. Parker teaching Lily to bake, and Mr. Parker taking her fishing just as her grandfather once had. Lieutenant Morrison, who continued to lead the investigation into Margaret Stevens' network, had become Judge Harrison's closest ally and friend through the ordeal. As they prepared breakfast together, Lily reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The past 6 months had not been easy. Margaret Stevens' release on bail had marked the beginning of a legal battle that continued to this day. Though barred from direct contact with Lily by a protective order, Stevens had launched a series of legal challenges to Judge Harrison's guardianship, citing his lack of formal foster parent training and his involvement in her prosecution as conflicts of interest. Each challenge had been defeated, but not without stress and anxiety. There had been late-night conferences with attorneys, emergency hearings, and constant vigilance. Max had earned his keep as a protector, alerting them to unfamiliar vehicles that lingered too long outside the house and maintaining his watchful presence whenever Lily ventured into public. The Thompson property in Mapleton remained in trust, its future to be decided when Lily turned 18. Judge Harrison had arranged for a caretaker to maintain the farmhouse and land, ensuring that this piece of Lily's heritage would be preserved. Occasionally, they visited the property together, Lily showing him the creek where she had fished with her grandfather and the apple orchard her grandmother had tended so carefully. These visits were bittersweet, but healing in their way. School had been another challenge. After careful consideration, Judge Harrison had enrolled Lily in Mapleton Elementary rather than the school closer to his home, wanting to maintain her connection to the community where she had grown up. This meant a longer drive each day, but the familiarity of seeing old friends and teachers had been worth it. Max, officially designated as Lily's service animal, had his own small bed in the corner of her second-grade classroom, where he quickly became the most popular student in school. Judge Harrison's role as special master for the property fraud cases had led to numerous other children being reunited with their communities or, when that wasn't possible, receiving proper compensation for their stolen inheritances. The case had grown to encompass 5 counties and involved more than 30 children over a 12-year period. Margaret Stevens now faced federal charges in addition to state prosecution, with her trial scheduled for the spring. The doorbell rang at precisely 9 o'clock, signaling the arrival of their first guests. Soon the house was filled with conversation, laughter, and the delicious smells of Christmas breakfast. Lieutenant Morrison brought news carefully delivered out of Lily's earshot that the final appeal of Stevens' legal team had been denied. Judge Harrison's guardianship was now permanent, pending only Lily's ongoing consent as she grew older. After breakfast came the present's practical gifts mostly, with a few surprises. Judge Harrison received a new fishing rod from the Parkers, a subscription to a gourmet coffee service from Sarah, and from Lily. A hand-drawn picture of the 3 of them, Lily, the judge, and Max framed in popsicle sticks and glitter. "It's us," Lily explained unnecessarily as Judge Harrison studied the drawing with suspiciously bright eyes. "Our family." "Yes," he agreed softly. "Our family." Max received new toys, specialty treats, and a monogrammed bed that Mrs. Parker had ordered specially. Lily unwrapped books, art supplies, a new winter coat, and finally a small jewelry box from Judge Harrison. Inside lay a delicate silver chain bearing 2 small pendants, a miniature replica of a judge's gavel and a tiny silver dog. "To remind you," Judge Harrison explained as he helped her fasten it around her neck, "that justice and loyalty go hand in hand. One without the other isn't enough." Later that afternoon, after their guests had departed and the wrapping paper had been cleared away, Judge Harrison suggested they bundle up for a walk. The December air was crisp but not bitter as they made their way through the snow-covered neighborhood. Max trotting happily ahead, occasionally looking back to ensure they were following. "I have one more surprise," Judge Harrison said as they rounded the corner toward the small neighborhood park. "Something I couldn't wrap and put under the tree." In the park's parking lot sat a brand-new SUV with a giant red bow on the hood. Beside it stood a familiar figure, Judge Harrison's sister Martha, who had visited twice from Chicago since Lily had come to live with them. "What's going on?" Lily asked. "Confused?" Judge Harrison smiled, the expression now coming more naturally to him than it had 6 months ago. "We're going on a trip to Arlington National Cemetery to visit Michael's grave. I thought it was time you met him, in a way, and time I introduced him to you." Tears sprang to Lily's eyes, not of sadness, but of understanding. This trip wasn't just a vacation, it was Judge Harrison's way of connecting the broken pieces of their lives, of acknowledging that they had both lost and found family in unexpected ways. Martha enveloped Lily in a warm hug. "The car's all packed. Max's travel bed is in the back, along with enough snacks to feed an army." She winked at her brother. "Walter was never much for spontaneity, so we've been planning this for weeks." As they drove out of Mapleton that evening, heading east toward a new adventure, Lily sat in the back seat with Max beside her, watching the familiar landmarks of town fade into the gathering darkness. She fingered the silver pendants at her neck, justice and loyalty, now inseparable in her mind, just as they had become in her life. The road ahead still held challenges. Margaret Stevens' trial loomed in the spring. There would be difficult questions about the future of the Thompson property. Someday, Lily knew, she would need to fully process all she had lost: parents, grandparents, the simple childhood that had been disrupted by greed and corruption. But for now, in this moment, Lily Thompson was simply a 7-year-old girl on a Christmas adventure with her unlikely family, a retired judge who had found purpose beyond the bench, and a loyal German shepherd who had kept his promise to protect her, no matter what. "Dad would like this," she whispered to Max, who pressed closer in the gathering darkness. "Don't you think he'd like where we ended up?" Max's soft whine of agreement was all the answer she needed, in a world that often seems to have forgotten the meaning of integrity and commitment. Lily and Max's story reminds us of what truly matters. For those of us who've weathered life's storms and seen how institutions can fail the most vulnerable among us, this tale speaks to our deepest fears and our highest hopes. Remember when America stood for neighbors helping neighbors, when we believed in second chances and unlikely heroes. This is that America, still alive in the hearts of a grieving judge who found purpose again, a loyal military dog who never forgot his mission, and a brave little girl who refused to let an unjust system separate her from her only family. As we watch our own grandchildren navigate an increasingly complex world, Lily's journey reminds us that one person standing up for what's right can still change everything. That family isn't always about blood, but about who stands beside you when the storms come. That our life experiences, even the painful ones, equip us to be someone else's miracle. And perhaps, most importantly, that it's never too late to open our hearts and homes to create the family we all need. Because in the end, isn't that what we're all searching for? Someone who will never give up on us?